Hi, I'm Randy Suarez, work in strategic marketing for Universal Music Latino here in Miami, Florida. UMG, which is Universal Music Group, is such a huge company, and within that umbrella are a lot of smaller labels, Motown, Interscope, Island, and Universal Music Latino is sort of the resident U.S. And Puerto Rico branch label. Strategic marketing is really interesting because it's the one position where you have to dabble in every single department, from publishing and legal, sync licenses, clearances. We mainly work the catalog, so we're sort of like the profit center of the company. We use existing catalog to make reissues, compilations, and one of the more interesting things we do, though, is we use some of our catalog for commercials, films, TV shows, premiums. For instance, if there's a retailer, brick and mortar retailer that wants to have a premium to give their clientele, we could put something together for them. So it's great, but you have to get clearances, you have to get artist approvals if it's certain artists. So it requires a lot of knowledge and a little bit of everything from publishing, like I said, all the way through legal and production. The rules basically state that a frontline release after 18 months becomes catalog. And after those 18 months, sales for that particular release are actually attributed to our department, strategic marketing. At that point, it's already catalog. But like you see in the Now series and several compilations, after a song is peaked, depending on the artist and artist approvals and the label, you'll start seeing it on compilations, hits compilations and whatnot. And the label's fairly good about that. I'd like to think it's a multitasking position. It's a three-headed monster. The director of our department here is a gentleman by the name of Bruce McIntosh. And I dabble a little bit in everything from marketing to production. I think my official title, believe it or not, is only assistant. But I've been with the company actually 8 years. I was actually here when it was Polygram. I'm one of the last, if not the last, at Universal Latino to survive the merger. And so sometimes they keep me around more for what I know than what I do. But I actually do quite a bit, not to toot my own horn or anything. But it's a head count thing. It gets a little political. Who can become a manager, who can move up. It's one of those things that unfortunately exists in our industry. It's very, very political. And it affects movement a lot. I started dabbling as a musician at a pretty early age, not as young as perhaps I would have liked. I think I was 11 when I started taking piano lessons. But I've always been a huge fan of music. My generation, I think, was probably the last that had that as one of the only alternatives for entertainment. Now there's just so many things competing for that same attention span that, although I don't think music is diluted in any way, it just doesn't have the same presence. Even radio doesn't have the same presence. How you acquire music isn't the same. But I remember the first albums I bought with my own money was the Beatles 67 through 70 and John Lennon's Double Fantasy. I'm a huge Beatlemaniac. My daughter, my third daughter, is going to be named Abby Rose. And my other daughter's named Marley. And so music's a big part of my life. I remember the first CDs I bought were The Wall and Sgt. Pepper and Rio by Duran Duran. So it's in my blood. I listen to all kinds. I think I'm pretty fortunate that way. There's some people who won't listen to certain genres or refuse to give it a shot. I've always been interested, and I'll dabble into it, and I'll find and I'll discover there's something there that's great that I like. And so I feel sort of blessed, to be honest with you, that I can listen to everything. If you look at my iPod, you'll find everything from Johnny Cash to Iron Maiden to Nina Simone and Coltrane. I mean, obviously the Beatles and Marley, and even some music for little kids, Elmo. But that's for my daughters, I think my parents, which were the immigrants from Cuba and Spain, it was a little difficult because that adjustment period, for our generation, we were the first to sort of be raised as Cuban Americans. We sort of rejected it for a long time. And I think most of my generation began to really embrace our heritage and our music. At least I'm speaking, at least as far as the Cuban Americans, was when the Buena Vista Social Club took off. And we started getting kind of interested. I mean, we always knew about our music. We always knew Celia Cruz, and we knew that the great salsa that came from Puerto Rico, and there was great vocalists that came from Spain and Mexico, and great salsa that came from Colombia, and every country had their thing, and we were sort of aware of it. But we didn't really begin to embrace it, I think, until about the mid-90s. And as we started having our own children, I think some of us feel compelled to make sure it doesn't get lost, that they are able to speak the language as well. And now I have a great appreciation for it. I do listen to all kinds of Latin music, and there's some amazing material out there. And I've kind of been fortunate because I've been able to go back and rediscover things I missed. And so it was great. It was like when you first discover the Beatles, and all you know is their hits, and then you pick up Rubber Soul and Revolver, and you think, wow, even the rest of these records were great. Well, this is a great scene, obviously. It's not the A scene it was even 4 or 5 years ago. It's changed a little bit. It's a lot of fun, obviously, but it's a lot of late nights. And the difference between DJs and, say, radio, especially Latin radio, which is very, very tricky. Billboard, actually, in their best and worst of the year, 2005, mentioned that Latin radio only broke a handful of artists. It was always the same, set of artists that they play. So that's frustrating. But a DJ, they want to be the first to break a record. They want to be the one that said, "I was playing this before." They want to be the first one to see the reactions of the crowd. And the good thing is that because we do some remixes, my partner and I, we get to create our own material, our own remixes. Sometimes, they're not necessarily, authorized remixes, but if you want to use them at a club level, there's no harm. And it's totally different. I think DJs are not the new rock stars, because they're not, but they sort of are a conduit to that particular audience. Well, it's called Melange, and we were in a rock band for a long time, my partner and I, and when we got that information back from that A&R that our lead singer was a good vocalist but not the thing that was going to get us to that promised land, we sort of had to look a little bit inward, and we both discovered, and we both always knew we had a love for electronic music and organic. So we sort of combined them, and when you hear it, you hear that's a real guitar, that's a real bass, there's a real saxophone, real flute, a lot of real harmonies, but the beats are obviously meant for a little bit of a different sort of ambiance. And we were all big fans of Sade and Everything But the Girl and the like, and we sort of incorporated all of that and kind of made our own thing. And as far as the image thing, which unfortunately is part of this industry, is how you project it. Our vocalist is she's very good looking and she's a great singer, but we didn't want somebody to just be a face. So it was important that she had the right soul and the right projection, and she does. We've been really blessed, to be honest with you, and let's see if it happens. Well, actually, one is a really famous song by a Brazilian songwriter called Amigo. The artist, songwriter is Roberto Carlos, very, very well known. The song has been covered many, many times. And we just took it apart, did a little reggae, chilled out version of it, totally different, but maintaining the original melody. And that was a lot of fun, because again, you get to tap into, Amigo is a perfect example. It's one of those songs all of my generation knew, Spanish-speaking, first generation immigrants or Cuban Americans or Hispanic Americans, and it was the last song you'd ever want to cover in its original format. It was kind of cornball, but the melody is money, and the message, it's a great song. It's about a very kind of, imagine if you two would write a song in Spanish about and the song, amigo means friend, and it's about God and Jesus. And we're not a religious band, but we are individually. We all have our sort of, we're in touch with our religion, and it was just a perfect song. It just sort of happened, and those are the best kind. You can't overthink these things because you'll tend to overcorrect or something. We just got in the studio and started humming the melody, and it matched, and it was really genius. And my partner was actually behind that. And we're not going to ever neglect the Spanish-speaking side of but we don't force the issue either. If we did 11 songs and all of them came out in English, then that's how it is. But if one song or two or three or all 11 turned out in Spanish, it was because it was naturally born that way. It wasn't. We won't ever force the issue. And I think you see that a lot. I won't name names, but there are artists that do that because they feel like they have to cater to both audiences, especially when they're crossover artists. And I don't think the consumers like it that much, to be honest with you. It always sounds more natural in one language than in the other, and the one where it's forced usually suffers. And you'll right away you'll get the reaction, ooh, I don't want to hear it, this version of it. I want to hear it. Sometimes it works, but it's very rare. It's very rare. One thing that's interesting is because the evolving status of Spanish-speaking citizens in the U.S., our Anglo division, which is UME, is starting to tap into our catalog and release things through their series, the 20th Century Masters, the Gold records. And it's good to have the knowledge. It helps. And I think it's usually the other way around. I think usually we try to copy their formats, their business models. But there's some that they've been able to learn from us as well, and it's been pretty fluid so far. And I think there's a market out there for it. I think if we can reach the client, the customer, and it surprises us. Sometimes we'll put out a regional Mexican record that we're just sort of releasing to get some numbers, and it'll do well. It'll do well in the Walmarts. It'll sell an alarming number of pieces in the sense that we never thought it would be that record. And the customer, the consumer out there, they're getting clever. They kind of know when you're just pushing a product and when it's a sincere piece that's been put together with some care and also what they want. Yeah, my wife is a teacher, an amateur photographer, and she kind of teaches her students when Napster was really a problem, was really taking off, that every time they did that, they were actually taking food out of my daughter's mouth. My first daughter, Chloe. And I think Apple, what they've done is genius. And I think it's kind of been a saving grace for us because although they were only 1%, I think, of the market the first couple of years, now up to like 4 to 6% now. I'm a buyer regularly on iTunes. And I've seen the other digital download stores, and they're also really good. It's just a great thing, and I just wish the music industry would have embraced technology a little sooner and not let it get so out of hand. I sometimes wonder if we went about it the right way. Every kid that becomes a musician, and they want to be a rock star. They want to be on stage. And I've had my rock star moments on a local level, and they were fun. But when I got to work in the industry, I thought, well, this is it. This is going to be the ticket in, to get the product, the thing we were working on, to get it noticed and get signed and do whatever it took to get there. But it turned out that nothing could be further from the truth. Once you get in, it's a little cynical. Everybody's a musician, everybody's a critic, and I was able to show some of our stuff around, and I got one really honest response that our vocalist, although he was a great singer, he was pitch perfect, he just didn't seem like he could really connect with audiences. He was sort of faceless, and it really brought about the importance of a lead singer in your band. needs to be somebody special, and not everybody can be Sting, not everybody can be Bono, but you have to have that connection. And that sort of realization, I think, would have only came about because I was inside the industry and I was able to get an honest opinion from an A&R person that I respected and knew what they were talking about. And so we sort of changed everything and searched a little deeper and found the DJ inside and got into that, and it's helped me. I've been able to make some progress. I've done some remixes, but with my partner as well. But it's tricky. It's political. There's also some conflict of interest, things that you have to consider. So I'm pretty careful about it now, and we're sort of looking for ways outside of the majors to get noticed and to get signed with, because I've seen how it works with a major. It's a lot of bottom line. I think ideally they would all love to break in deserving artists, but that's not always the case. You have to put the money where the artists who bring in the money, and it puts a lot of pressure on strategic marketing because we generate the profit a lot of times for these companies and for the majors. So it's tricky, and you see a lot of deserving artists maybe not get the sort of push they need, and sometimes they do, and it just doesn't connect, even though it's a great record. A perfect example is Juanes, a great artist, very deserving of his status, but his first album, the sales were only okay, and it wasn't until he won a whole bunch of Grammys for that first album that he really sort of got sort of that national attention, and then he delivered a spectacular follow-up album justifying the praise. But he's one of the rare ones. You don't see that happen very often. When Polygram went from Philips to Universal and became Unigram, it was a day, I think it was called Black Tuesday or something, which is when they laid off a lot of people and they merged a lot of the labels. And even the artists took it very hard. I remember some artists at the following Grammys, shout out to those people that were gone, and so many of them were justifiably qualified for their positions, but it just happens. A corporation like this, if you have overlapping positions, I think you have to fly a little bit under the radar, and I think you have to be a little bit lucky. I think you have to kind of, every time there's a merger like that, they'd like to keep a few people because of their knowledge of the catalog, their inner workings. And, it's a smart business move to make. It's tough because so many people you lose touch with, regardless of how hard you try to stay in touch with them. And so that's difficult. And Polygram was a totally different company. And, maybe also at that time, the industry was still really strong. It was still a gravy train. And they really displayed that with the employees. There was a lot of perks. And I've noticed the perks have gone less and less over the years, but I still feel blessed. This beats working at a bank. I'm not knocking people who work at a bank, but the music industry is it's still a lot of fun. And I still think music is a huge part of our society. Everybody, some way, some form, they're humming some song, they're singing along to the radio, they're dancing at parties still. And, I think it's our birthright to create and enjoy music. Honestly, when I got into the industry, I was just married, so I had a lot more available hours. And I've grown in the industry, and I've also grown the size of my family. It's changed quite a bit. It's a little tough on families. A lot of people stay late. There's a lot of events you have to go to, a lot of things to consider. So you need a really strong support system. And you have to have some balance in your life. You got to know how to juggle these things and prioritize, especially all the way from strategic marketing. When we were putting out 11 records in one book and working on several different projects on the side, you got to sort of know how to prioritize. You got to do that, apply that also in your life, especially to survive in this industry. And those that are in the industry, they don't want to leave. So it's tough to get in, but getting an internship is always a good start. And having the right attitude and being sort of vocal with your ideas, but not too pushy, and It's still a lot of the old guard. They know what they're talking about. Being a good listener helps.